Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras.
And I'm Natasha Kircha. Coming up in today's newscast, Hamas looks to take advantage of Israel's current lack of government.
Israel's very own version of Air Force One finally takes off.
And we'll reveal which Israeli food is becoming this year's biggest global food trend.
In the wake of the latest round of rockets fired at Israel from the Gaza Strip, the European Union is now offering condemnations. Releasing a short statement on Sunday, the EU says that firing rockets against civilians is unacceptable and must be stopped immediately and unconditionally.
But the statement does not name any specific terror group for the rockets or Hamas for failing to control Gaza. Instead, it lists only that over a dozen rockets from Gaza were launched by Palestinian armed groups.
Over the weekend, about 10 rockets were fired into southern Israel, triggering the Iron Dome system and alarms. One private residence was struck while the family was hiding in a nearby shelter, and Israel retaliated with airstrikes targeting Hamas's military installations.
But at any rate, Israel has bigger fish to fry. The Hamas terror organization is now threatening to kick tensions up a notch. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar on Sunday said that Hamas could take advantage of the vacuum in Jerusalem's leadership.
I.e. that without a government formed to approve budgets or discuss security issues such as the Iranian threat, quote, "We are ready to secure the release of our prisoners and make all possible efforts to achieve that."
And that does reveal a deeper issue with having such a record-long and continuing election process.
Because it's true that until a dedicated coalition and security cabinet comes together, Israel may be unable to respond to certain threats.
Now, speaking of threats, for many nations around the world, it's perfectly normal for the leaders to have a dedicated motorcade of vehicles at the ready, especially a plane like Air Force One.
Yeah, unfortunately, though, Israel is not one of those countries, but it will be very soon. After 2 years of preparations, Israel's very own version of Air Force One is finally taking off for its first round of test flights. And unveiled at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv on Thursday, the Boeing 767-300ER aircraft, codenamed 4XISR, will soon be ferrying Israel's presidents and prime ministers all around the world. The only problem is that it's not out of testing just yet, and there are kinks still yet to fix. For one, during takeoff in the initial test on Thursday, there was a brake malfunction leading to a brief emergency alert. On Sunday, though, things were already looking up as the plane took off for a short morning flight, accompanied by a Black Hawk helicopter and another plane for photos. And once it's finally in regular use, people will be in awe. The Israel Aerospace Industries reworked the passenger plane over the past 2 years with a budget of over $205 million. And it's been fitted with, quote, sophisticated technological systems that keep its communications secure and ensure safety. IAI also states that the craft can reach the United States, China, Japan, and Brazil, all without stopovers.
Talk about first-class flying,
Yes,
huh?
absolutely. I'm glad we finally have a plane of our own now.
Well, we're going to have to see if we can get, a tour, a personal tour in it.
Yeah, that
That's
would be
for
the
our
best.
next item.
But back in politics, it's day 12 of Benny Gantz's historic bid to form a government in Israel, and it seems like talks are finally moving forward, even if just at a crawl's pace.
Not too surprising is that the majority of the public supports these negotiations, according to a new survey by the Israel Democracy Institute. Now, the report released on Sunday claims that a 62% majority of Israelis would support their respective parties in joining a coalition under the Blue and White Party and its chairman Benny Gantz, including nearly half of voters on the right, the Joint Arab List, and even the Likud.
Supporters of the religious Jewish parties were more reluctant, however, over sitting with Blue and White's number 2, Yair Lapid. But the thing is that while 62% supported unity under Gantz and 53% supported unity in general, the report also found that the reason wasn't necessarily support for Blue and White. Rather, it's simply an aversion to third elections.
Yeah, in fact, only 17.5% of respondents supported a third vote. Well, only 43% say they're optimistic about the future of democracy in the country. But as third elections become a more pressing reality, the 55-member-strong right-wing bloc appears to weaken more and more, making way for a coalition to finally take form, but regardless of who's in charge. All right, today marks 24 years since the late Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated. And ILTV's Shana Folt is here to remind us what happened on this somber day.
It was the evening of November 4th, 1995, and Yitzhak Rabin, along with thousands of Israelis, was at a rally in support of the Oslo Accords. After singing Shir LaShalom, the song for peace, he left the rally when out of nowhere, he was shot.
בצער רב וביגון עמוק על מותו של ראש הממשלה.
ראש ממשלת ישראל יצחק רבין אינו עוד בין החיים, הוא נהרג ביריות המתנקש יגאל עמיר.
The shooter, extremist Yigal Amir, was arrested and convicted for the murder. And though he's been behind bars ever since, his punishment has never eased the sorrow of the people. Rabin had been a beacon of hope for his people, the chance to end an unrelenting fight. The Oslo Accords were his attempt to cease the suffering for both sides.
אני אלך לממש את מה שאני מאמין בתהליך השלום עם הפלסטינאים ועם הסורים.
But not everyone agreed with the terms of the Oslo Accords. Many Israelis believed the Palestinian Liberation Organization could not be a true partner in peace, and that they were just signing on to the deal to take back land from Israel as part of their ultimate goal to take over Israel entirely and form one Palestinian state. Other Israelis were outraged at even the thought of forfeiting Israeli land and allowing the IDF to withdraw from parts of Gaza and the West Bank. Rabin rose through the army ranks, starting his service before Israel even gained statehood. By 1974, he took over the top seat in parliament, replacing former Prime Minister Golda Meir. Rabin never sat back, signing a peace treaty with Jordan in 1994.
Your Majesty, peace between states is peace between people.
Before his murder, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, along with political rival Shimon Peres and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. Once called Malchei Yisrael, today, the plaza where the trailblazer was killed is called Rabin Square. Hundreds of thousands mourned his death. Young people came out in droves to pay respects for the 72-year-old, and leaders from around the world flew in to say their final goodbyes.
Yitzhak Rabin was my partner and my friend. I admired him. Let me just say, Shalom, Haver. Goodbye, friend.
All right, in other news, Israel is set to hit a new record high this year for shekels borrowed in mortgages. In the first 9 months of 2019 alone, Israelis borrowed 50.5 billion shekels worth of housing loans.
But the recent boom in the market is sounding off alarms for some economists who see bubble conditions similar to those preceding the crash of 2008. Well, here now with more is value creation expert Dr. Alex Komen. So my first question for you is why is everything so expensive? Why is the real estate so expensive here?
Because first of all, supply is very limited, because much of the land in Israel belongs to the government. It's very bureaucratic, so the release of land is very, very slow. And the demand in Israel is very high because Moshe Kahlon, who was the previous Minister of Finance, he basically promised he would cut prices. And so people just waited for prices to drop by, say, 30, 40%. Mm-hmm. Nothing like that happened. So everybody was holding their breath, particularly young couples. Right. They were holding their breath, living in rental apartments, paying through their noses. And now they basically gave up. They jumped off the fence. And now there's huge demand for real estate.
So are these bubble-like conditions? Is this somehow dangerous to the economy?
Okay, but if we try to arrange bubbles in a hierarchy of bubbles, thinking about the subprime bubble in the U.S., that's not what we have here, because in the U.S. it was really reckless. People received loans that were worth 120 times the real estate.
Right, which is just
that's nothing.
insane.
I mean, in Israel, the most you
But
can
it was
look
also
at
more than the borrowers could realistically pay back in many cases.
Absolutely. So that was really
But
reckless.
isn't that
It
similar
was
to
really
what's taking place here? Because who can...
No, but here you will only receive something like 60%. I mean, if you buy an apartment, you would need to bring from home at least something like 40 or more than that. So in the U.S., you would get 120% and you'd refinance, and that's how so we can have a bubble, but it will not be dramatic as the subprime bubble. And also banks in Israel, are, because they don't repackage your mortgages and resell them as it happened in the States, they would really try to make sure that you can actually pay your mortgage back. So you can have a bubble, but it would be a moderate, tiny bubble.
Well, and it's interesting what you said before, which is just kind of that desire. Israelis have a desire to own real estate, which is actually not the same in other parts of the world, right?
Right. I mean, if you look at many places in Europe, Berlin, for instance, the great majority, something like 80% of people live in rental apartments, and there's rent control. I mean, in New York, there's rent control. You see it all over the world. So the majority of people spend their whole life in rented apartments. In Israel, it's the opposite. The idea that I live in somebody else's apartment is shocking. So everybody wants to buy an apartment, and the parents need to sell their kidneys to finance apartments for their kids. So it's really a mobilization of the whole family to actually get apartments owned.
So is there, like, what are the pros and cons of the market the way it is?
In terms of investment, especially right now.
Sure.
Well, the pros are that interest rates are very, very low. I mean, historically, we don't remember such low interest rates. I remember interest rates of 8% and 10%, and today you're talking about 2 or 3%. So it's very advantageous if you take a loan, if you don't have the money to put it up front. The disadvantage is that nobody knows where the prices are going to go from here. I mean, if there's a bubble and which will burst, by the way, I personally do not expect that to happen in the near term. But if that would be the situation, it would be really frustrating to buy apartments at a higher rate and then sell them. I think another solution, if you think about investments, is not to buy an actual apartment, but to invest in real estate investment trusts. And these are big companies that buy many, they might have shopping malls, they might have hundreds of apartments. And so you don't actually own a particular apartment, but you own shares, which makes it much more fluid, because if you have an apartment and you need money for something, you need to sell the whole apartment, which is not...
Right.
But if you're invested in a company, if you have shares, you can...
Just buy all those shares.
Exactly, just part of the shares, so you can just sell 20% of your shares. So it's much more fluid, and it's attached to the value of real estate.
Aaron, you writing this down?
I really want to.
Show me the money.
Show me the money, right?
Exactly.
So my final question for you, and if you could just kind of give us a short answer, is: are the real estate prices, going to continue rising here in Israel, or are we going to see something change?
Well, in the near term, definitely they are going to rise, because there was a big freeze in development, so the supply actually froze, and demand is hectic. In the longer term, they might decline, but in the near term, say 2-3 years ahead, it's hard to imagine, unless there's something in terms of security that's dramatic. With Lebanon, Gaza.
Yeah, that's the part that we left out of this conversation, just some of the
that
fears
can always drive up or down the price, depending on where it is.
Yeah.
All right, well, Dr. Cohen, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, next time we're going to make the whole episode just an interview about this. So interesting. All right, thanks for joining us. All right, now moving on. For the first time ever, an Israeli flag is appearing on the International Space Station, which orbits around the Earth.
And that's because a Tel Aviv startup called AstroRad has now been chosen to provide its anti-radiation vests that astronauts will wear to protect themselves in outer space for a test run. Now, in the wee hours of Saturday morning, the vests went into a supply flight with 4,000 kilograms of equipment headed for the space station. And 3 female American astronauts are set to wear the suit in varied gravity conditions at the space station in order to get feedback on range of motion and overall comfort. The vests were created with the help of the Israel Space Agency as well as Lockheed Martin, and they protect bone marrow, lungs, and the chest and the ovaries, which is ideal for women since the ovaries are particularly susceptible to tumors as a result of radiation. And finally, the space station is shared by 5 space groups, including the United States, Russia, Japan, Europe, and Canada.
Now, I don't know about you, but one of my biggest pet peeves is seeing all the trash on the beach. I just cannot understand all of the littering that you see here.
Absolutely, and it's not just at the beach, actually. Cities and national parks and way more are all overrun by litter.
Well, luckily, our next guest runs an organization that hopes to reverse this trend, but he needs our help. So please welcome Jordan Marcelino, founder and CEO of the Beautiful Land Initiative.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so what is this Beautiful Initiative? Tell us about it.
Well, in 2015, I launched it really with a vision to bring people together from around the world to be a catalyst for culture transformation in Israel. So in other words, in thinking about how do we solve a problem in a place where people don't care, and or where at least it seems that there's no
Which in this
care
case
about
is
it.
littering.
That's right, littering. And so it occurred to me to bring in lovers of Israel from around the world who would see the value immediately, and that way start something up. And now we're hearing from people across the country, from north to south. We're hearing from locals.
What do you do, though?
We actually go out, we bring teams together and go out and pick up litter in public spaces, beaches. We've removed 70 tons from around the Sea of Galilee, an additional 30 tons from elsewhere in the country, from other places throughout. And so it's really been an incredible journey thus far.
How many volunteers are we talking about? Because those are
That's
some
a
impressive
huge amount,
numbers.
yeah.
Yeah. So how many people how many hands are taking part in this?
So far, we've had 5,000 plus, removing almost 15,000 bags of trash and 100 tons of litter.
And these aren't just Israelis, right?
75% come from the outside or coming internationally, largely from the evangelical movement, and another 25% is right here, homegrown, ready to rock and roll and clean up the land.
And have we seen, any sort of cultural shift in people after they leave, or maybe before they hear of you, in any sort of sense?
Yeah, there's we've heard it all, in the sense that there's some people who say, the term frère,
Yeah.
So of course we've heard, that's right, and we've heard that quite a bit. But by and large, what I see is incredible appreciation for the work we do. And whenever we encounter somebody and they see the team and they see what's going on, they see the heart in which it's being done, which is not people begrudgingly going out. It's people stoked with smiles on their faces, fired up, ready to lend a hand for the restoration of Israel. And so, yeah.
Where are the areas where you see the most trash? That's what's interesting to me here.
Honestly, I've seen it in just about every city that I've been. I just noticed it on the way here. But we've seen it by and large in high traffic recreational areas that have little to no infrastructure.
Wow,
And
so like parks and just open
And the beach.
areas.
I mean, when you enter the water in Tel Aviv, it's really upsetting what you
Yeah,
say.
there are parts of it that
But
are
I mean,
gross.
Israel has been on a mission of sorts to kind of combat this issue. We're hearing that most Israelis want to, get rid of one-use
plastic.
plasticware. Reusable straws. But do you think that there is going to be any change that is actually enacted?
Yeah, politically speaking, I mean, I think that people like Ron Kobe and Tiberius, who has been very strongly supportive of the work that we do, starting with the previous mayor. But of course, Ron is huge on making Tiberius shine, which is what we're about as well, is making the land shine. And so I'm seeing more and more people like him who are rising up to the challenge. Obviously we need to get the attention of those who are empowered to really make those huge shifts. But what I believe with all my heart is that there needs to first be a fire that is started in the people. That there's an agreement between people and government for a place to remain beautiful.
Yeah.
And so there really has to be an inner agreement. And so that's what we try to do is stoke that fire, remind people in this country as Israelis who we are, where we come from. We've come through quite a lot to get to this place. So to see litter here and there and really in huge amounts, amounts from time to time is really shocking. So we have to rise up as a nation, say no more. There's a global problem, but it can certainly not continue in the Holy Land.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I mean, I come from like a camping background, and I'm from the mindset of, make it better than what it was when you get there.
Yeah.
So take part. Maybe look into
volunteer. Maybe we should go
volunteering
volunteer.
or somehow supporting the Beautiful Land Initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In other news, Israel has never before participated in the Summer Olympic Games for surfing.
But that's finally all changing ahead of the next event. ILTV's Nittany Manson has the story.
Israeli surfer Anat Lelior won her first ever qualifier event, putting Israel on the map for surfing in the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. And Lelior is currently in the Israeli Defense Force, but she says she's getting a load of support from the army while she rides that Olympic wave, hopefully all the way to the east. After taking first place at an August World Surf League event, Lelior went on to qualify for the Olympics in another match 3 weeks later. And the surf pro will represent Israel under the Women's European slot. But only 2 of each gender are allowed to compete per country, and Lelior's spot on the team has not been confirmed. Still, she says surfing has allowed her to make friends from Iran, Costa Rica, and Hawaii, and she's being sponsored by an investment company and surf shop in Israel, saying that because of this experience, she's expecting even more from herself.
It's amazing. There are a lot of surfers here in Israel, so I'm not surprised.
And congratulations, Lelior.
Of course. Yeah. All right, now every year there are hundreds of thousands of emergency room visits for food-related allergies in the United States alone. And some people are so affected by their allergens that even being near them can result in death.
Yeah, so to give back the sense of freedom and safety that's been lost, an Israeli company called Allergies has now created a device that can virtually sniff out the environment for specific triggers like peanuts and soy.
Now this for me is really exciting because my husband has serious allergies, and this device is about the size of a TV remote control. The technology is able to scan allergens in just 30 seconds. So while some devices require taking a solid food sample to test for the allergens inside, the Allergies actually only scans food in a gas form, which never requires messing around with your food. Instead, you just wave the Allergies over your plate.
And that was actually a big part of why the company's CEO said he felt compelled to create this device. He wanted something that people would actually use without feeling embarrassed. Plus, with a food sample, you might miss a sprinkle or a drop of some sort of allergen on the other side of the plate that you didn't sample, while the Allergies scans it all at once.
Now, for now, the company still has another 18 months of research and development ahead, unfortunately. But after that, the Allergies will be sold for about $150, and the first Allergies model will be able to detect peanuts. Very important.
Yeah, and I'm so sure that people with allergies, parents of kids with allergies...
I want to buy this already because I know that it will come in handy for me personally.
Absolutely. This is going to be the next thing, for sure.
Yeah. All right, we'll see.
All right, but speaking of food, our next incredible story centers around the hard-to-pronounce but ever-delicious shug.
No.
Shug.
Shug. Shug. That's how you guys say it.
Everyone is going crazy for it, but what is it, and why does it matter?
Well, it matters because it's super tasty, obviously, and it's a staple of the Israeli cuisine. It's a spicy sauce, but it actually hasn't always been so popular. Shug is a spicy chili, pepper, cilantro, and garlic-based paste, and the Jews from Yemen actually brought the recipe over to Israel years ago, after which it's flourished in popularity.
Especially, by the way, since the green version is said to have healing powers, while the peppers supposedly help with overeating. And now it's been adopted not only by Israelis, but the rest of the world, too.
Yeah, well, in terms of the overeating, I mean, you literally cannot eat that much shug because it's so spicy.
No, it helps.
Yeah, but what is important to know is that Forbes magazine has just named shug the year's biggest global food trend. They're saying that it's the world's new Racha.
That's right. You can now find shug on the shelves of supermarkets just about everywhere. But also remember that shug isn't too tough to just make at home either. So check out the recipe and please pass the shug.
I know. I use it religiously in my home. So I'm not surprised about this. We'll just put it that way. All right, now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be mostly clear and cool with lows hanging around 63 or 17 degrees Celsius. And then tomorrow you can expect more clear to partly cloudy skies and an average high of about 85 or 30 degrees Celsius. Eilat, as usual, though, will be a bit hotter with highs around 93 or 34 degrees Celsius.
All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate
is 3.52 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. I'm Aaron Porras.
And I'm Natasha Kirchak. Thanks so much for watching.